This is the Analysing Anfield podcast on the Blood Red channel, bringing you the best tactical and statistical analysis of Liverpool FC.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. Dave, how are you getting on and how is the haircut?
Long, messy, and it's at a different angle today. Don't know if people are going to notice, but the way the camera's positioned, it's side on, so people are getting a side on profile here. But yeah, except for that, mate, all good. Looking forward to the show.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot going on in the outside world, but thank God we've got football, really. We did have Manchester United. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to look ahead to Burnley. Usually don't tend to preview the FA Cup games. I know we've got Manchester United coming up, but it's probably going to be United and Burnley this episode. So, you know, we'll see how we go, see how we get on. But in terms of Manchester United then, what are your thoughts, Dave?
Strange game, really. I feel like there was moments throughout. Liverpool started quite well, I thought. Seemed to get in good positions. Had obviously, they had 8 shots in the opening 30 minutes, although nothing was really spectacular, was it, in terms of like high quality chances. But they were working themselves into good positions. But it felt like they lost the grip a little bit of the game the longer it went on, and you'd probably say United finished stronger. So yeah, a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, I think part of the match went for me as expected. Other parts maybe a little bit less. So I thought in the first half an hour specifically, Liverpool were really free-flowing. The shackles felt like they were off a little bit. Obviously, Liverpool hadn't previously won a game in 3 matches. And I think in that period, we'd maybe scored 1 goal. Still haven't scored. But I think the way we went into the game, it just felt a little bit more natural. But then maybe after the half-hour period progressed and we still haven't found the net, maybe then it planted a little bit of a seed in our heads. I mean, if you go into Understat, Dave, and check the expected goals timeline, the race map, Liverpool are very much the dominant team for about an hour, really, in terms of what they've generated on the scoring opportunities side and stuff. And then very late in the match, United end up virtually evening it out with 2 big chances. But I think in terms of the game, I said 1-1 previewing it. Can't remember what you said, but it just went roughly as expected, I thought, apart from, the first half an hour was Liverpool really, really on the game, I suppose.
Yeah. So, they started well, and it just felt like, getting into that, it feels like they progressed into the final third quite easily. And I know some of that ties in with the fact that United sat fairly deep, allowed them to do so. But I still thought, Thiago progressed the ball well through the lines, and, Robertson, Alexander-Arnold were getting touches in the final third. A lot of the stuff that you're used to with Liverpool, but there just wasn't that same kind of quickness in the decision making in and around the penalty area, because even though, as I touched on there was 8 shots in the opening 30 minutes, there was only maybe 1 or 2 that felt like a good chance. A lot of the times it felt like just kind of snapshots and nothing of note, I guess. So yeah, that's basically our team to pan out.
To be honest, what you've just said there, it feels like that's been the case for quite a while now. Like when Liverpool beat Crystal Palace 7-0, that was exactly a month ago, I think, today. I didn't actually realise it was that long ago. And, it's been so many games since whereby Liverpool haven't really clicked, I suppose, maybe is the word. And I think what you've just mentioned there in terms of the scoring opportunities Liverpool generated, the shots, again, it felt again like similar to the past 3 games. There's been no real chance where you've thought has to put that away, or that's relatively easy to finish, or he had time to shoot there with no pressure on the ball. Every shot that Liverpool seem to be taking lately seems to be pressurised, rushed in a busy area from a tricky angle. The whole putting a shot on a plate isn't really happening of late.
No, it isn't. And what I think's interesting to see what you say as well. We banging the drum a little bit in the summer, weren't we, about how it's important that you start seeing a little bit of evolution for the side, because it's been quite the same now for maybe two or 3 years. We kind of saw Thiago as some of that evolution, a player who can progress through the lines with kind of short, precise, or just really precise passing, I guess. But he hasn't been able to play many games so far, has he? And Liverpool kind of been setting up how they usually do. I know, ironically, they changed a little bit in this game, but a lot of sides have had success into Liverpool doing the same thing this year. They've just really, sitting in, trying to nullify, closing the spaces. And it does feel like Liverpool are struggling with it. It feels like, we know teams historically in football tend to create a winning formula and benefit from it, and then it's on the other opponents to catch up and try and find a way to stop it. And that's kind of just how football works. And normally the great side, like United under Ferguson, they tend to just evolve and find new ways. And I don't know if Liverpool just haven't been able to do that so far this season, and that's why they're not able to, repeat what they've done in the last 2 years. I think the obvious caveat is the big injuries that are massively upsetting things a little bit, but it's interesting to see whether that's what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, the strange thing though with that is it just doesn't really, the approach that has been taken by opponents hasn't really been anything special, and it's been the type of approach that Liverpool have just found breakthroughs through for the past few seasons. Like, I think there was a point up until fairly recently, at the end of last season maybe, whereby Liverpool had won something like 20 matches in a row against newly promoted teams. The whole shout that Liverpool couldn't really break down a low block was kind of eradicated for a period, I thought. That seems to have returned a little bit. I mean, I looked at after the United game, I looked at the numbers for Liverpool's season across the Premier League only, and I tried to look at the past 4 in isolation almost, compared to everything that came before, and there's not a great deal of difference across most of the numbers. The number of shots that hit the target, maybe, average distance of the shots taken. I think the expected goals per shot has taken a little bit of a hit. Like, expected goals per shot against United was 0.1. Against Newcastle, it was 0.1. Against West Brom, it was 0.1. And against Southampton, it was 0.07. Before that, our average for the season is a little bit higher than that. I think around 0.13. There's not a lot in that. But I think if you look at the defensive side of things, there was one specific change in terms of Liverpool's pressing. And I don't think it's specifically Liverpool taking the foot off the gas, but maybe just getting the opportunity to press less, basically. So up until and including Crystal Palace, Liverpool had only had 2 games all season whereby we had pressured the ball fewer than 100 times in a game. That was 90 against West Ham and 94 against Spurs. And then we faced West Brom, and in the West Brom game there was only 58 pressures for Liverpool. Then we faced Newcastle, 87 pressures. Then we faced Southampton, 86 pressures. So Liverpool's 3 lowest press counts, if you like, of the season came in a row, and Liverpool didn't win any of them. Against United, it boosted right back up to 147 pressures. But I just felt like, looking at that, maybe that, I think rather than offering an insight into Liverpool not trying as much, I think maybe it just captures a stylistic thing there whereby, you know, West Brom have wanted the point, Newcastle have wanted the point, Southampton took a really early lead, and as a result, Liverpool have kind of been nullified in terms of generating shots through pressing, and it's instead been a complete possession game from start to finish, which Liverpool have improved in recent years, but lately don't seem as suited to doing for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to mention it, but you've basically finished on the point I was about to say. That a lot of that probably ties into the fact that they've dominated possession, so there's going to be less pressing opportunities, isn't there? But I mean, that kind of tied into the point you were trying to make at the end there, which I think is true. I did notice yesterday I was doing a piece for the Echo. It was a conversation I was having as well, just about Liverpool. We're looking in at shots because, you know, I thought it was quite interesting. Klopp said, didn't he? You know, we always miss chances. This is after the match. He said we always miss chances. Then we'd have another. We'd then use, and that's how it is. And I wrote on it. I saw Sam Maguire wrote a similar piece on 23, looking at the shots, and it does seem that. Well, I'll go through it now. Use Salah as the example. Salah's had 9 shots in the previous 4 matches, which is, you know, breaking down if it was a per 90 average of 2.25. Obviously, we always talk about him being a volume player. I think last season he was averaging close to 3.7 shots per 90. So, you know, that drop from 3.7 to 2.25 is a lot really for a player like Salah, who does kind of rely on volume to score, doesn't he? Like, he takes a lot of shots, and if he's getting, you know, 1.5 shots fewer per game, that is going to affect his goal record. So he seems to be getting fewer shots. Mane does, Liverpool's 2 most dangerous. But then there seems to be an increase for Firmino of about 20%, you know, over these last 4 games. So he's having about like 50% of Liverpool's shots, and you know, he's not the best finisher, is he? We were talking throughout the game about his performance in general, but in fact, your tweet, it probably summarises it. The one where you said, you know, the last person you probably want a chance to fall to is your number 9 from a Liverpool perspective, which is a bit crazy, but it is true. And yeah, and what we're seeing is he at this present time, we don't know if maybe it's to do with Thiago being able to, you know, penetrate a little bit better, so he doesn't need to drop in as much. But he's getting more chances. The other 2 aren't, and obviously he's not as clinical.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned Sadio Mane there and the front three in general. I think this is probably a good little time for me to bring in the performance numbers for the season. I wrote about this yesterday. If you want to read the actual piece on it, just check out my Twitter at Distance Covered, and it's the latest piece for Liverpool.com. But I think Liverpool's under/over performance. Have you seen it, Dave, this season?
Just the performance numbers in general,
as in performing above or below expected in terms of the goals you're expected to score.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, looking at it now.
Well, it's taken quite a hit. I hadn't actually realised, but the numbers from the piece, they are quite interesting because you know, Liverpool in 2017-18, which I think was Salah's first season, Liverpool overperformed their expected goals in attack by 11.9 goals. So they scored 11.9 goals than the average team would have if they had took the same shots from the same locations, if you like. The following year, Liverpool again overperformed by 10.7 goals. And then last season, obviously we won the league, we overperformed again by 10.3 goals. This season, Liverpool currently underperforming by exactly 1. And this is all excluding penalties, by the way. All of those numbers are excluding penalties. So Liverpool have gone from being a team that scores roughly around 10, 11 goals more than expected per season, which comes down to, you know, your finishing, maybe getting the odd goal from a set piece, which your expected goals would value quite low because it's just a header, but from a set piece, maybe you can make use of that and start performing above expectations and stuff. Liverpool have gone from that to, you know, a -1 underperformance is basically although it's underperformance, it's still very close to performing as expected. So Liverpool have gone from finishing in attack like a superhuman team in a way to finishing like an average team, and it's taken a bit of a hit on the overall results, I suppose.
Yeah. On that point, it does make you think. Obviously, it'll vary from model to model, and it's really important to point out how we know XG isn't an exact science. There's plenty of flaws in it, but it's still the best of what we have, really. Performance indicator, I guess. And Liverpool did finish about, was it something like 25 points over their expected points last season? I know it was high. Yeah. So on that basis, was the only result this season going to be some form of regression? Would it, for that to happen again? I know there was an overperformance the year before, but to happen again like that, it would have been a huge shock, wouldn't it? So are we really just seeing a bit of regression that couldn't have been escaped?
All I'd say on that though is the overperformance in attack has been a constant for 3 seasons. Like in the piece, I actually accumulated it. So over the past 3 seasons, that means Liverpool have overperformed in attack by 32.9 goals. So Liverpool have basically over a 3-year period scored 33 goals more than the average team would, based on the same shots, if you like. And compared that to rivals of the Big Six, just the Big Six teams, the only team that's overperformed to a greater extent is Manchester City. And most of that was in, I think, City's first big season under Pep. I think they overperformed by about 22 goals in attack. Then Liverpool, then Arsenal, then United, then Tottenham, and then Chelsea over the same 3-year period have only overperformed by over 5 goals. But I think it's interesting because, obviously the Liverpool game against United, the expected goals on the day, Liverpool posted 1.5 and United posted 0.9. 16 shots for Liverpool to Manchester United's 8. But again, as I said, no goals. So if you're posting an expected goals of 1.5 and you're not scoring, and that happens 4 weeks in a row, really, you're going to get to a point whereby you're performing below expectations, even though slightly before that, Liverpool managed to bag 7 against Crystal Palace from an expected goals of about 2 and a bit, 3 maybe.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's it's quite it's quite interesting, really. My opinion is probably that Liverpool are probably, if we talk about that overperformance, my opinion is, the way you talk about the regression to the mean, I don't think that the mean is the XG number. I don't think the average is what Liverpool are. I think they're expected to be above average, aren't they? But you're looking maybe not to the level it was last season, maybe a middle ground in between. For example, the way it is now, it looks horrendous, doesn't it, if you're someone who just focuses on goals scored. Obviously, we don't. We look a little bit deeper than that. I'd say, this isn't going to continue. I do believe that Liverpool are going to start scoring goals again. But where they're probably not as the overperformed they were last season, but they're not kind of where they are either. They're going to kind of be, as it mellows out, somewhere in between, I think, is the best way to summarise that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at those past 3 seasons, you could argue Liverpool are due a bit of a streaky patch on the positive side. Now Liverpool are due a bit of luck, whatever you want to call it, because it's a team that tends to overperform by about 10 goals, and Liverpool are currently underperforming by 1. So that tends, and if you look at how important underperformance tends to be, just for a bit of perspective on that, the current top 6 in the Premier League are all overperforming in attack, except Liverpool. Spurs overperforming by 6, Everton overperforming by 4.9, United overperforming by 3.3, Chelsea 3, and City only just City overperformer by exactly one. So I suppose it's a bit of a hats off to Liverpool that they're still in the top four despite being the only underperforming team when it comes to finishing your shots. But it's just something that's got to turn around relatively quickly because, yeah, I mean, you have to score goals to win the league, and it's not really happening for Liverpool at the minute. As you mentioned, against Manchester United, all of Liverpool's shots, or big shots at least, fell to Roberto Firmino, who isn't the man for that, maybe you could say. And I think, obviously, you mentioned earlier about Liverpool developing and stuff like that and moving forward and things. I must say, I think if Liverpool would have had their usual team, plus Thiago, plus Jota, you know, that's a serious outfit, and I think Liverpool have probably got a bit of a lead in the division if that's the case. But I think it's been quite an unfortunate period for the team because injuries have been thrown at Liverpool, and you know the centre back problem, and at the same time now for the first time it looks like the front three aren't really firing as normal and able to get Liverpool out of trouble. So it's kind of a multitude of hurdles Liverpool are trying to jump over at the minute.
Yeah, I think the Jota point's really important as well, because when we were talking about that needing to freshen up and evolve, that was something big we said, that kind of front line needs to go from 3 to 4. You need cover in each position, so you needed a versatile forward and you needed someone clinical. Jota has been perfect. All right, he come in on a hot streak, didn't he? And I'm not saying that he was going to score like that consistently, because it probably wasn't sustainable, but he's still proven that he's going to be a clinical forward, kind of exactly what Liverpool needed. And his injury has turned out to be massive, hasn't it? Huge, in fact. And I think in these tight games, because one thing you will say is that the games have been settled one goal either way, or draws, haven't they? And just when you need someone to be a little bit more clinical in front of goal, he could have been that person, and he could have turned a couple more of these draws into victories, or maybe, you know, rescued something at Southampton, turning that from a defeat to a loss, and would have just made the record that bit better. So, you know, he's important to point out because he's been a big miss.
Yeah, I mean, what was this better? I think that's one thing we need to maybe touch upon. Was this a better performance? Does this offer hope? Could this have gone differently? Or was this... could you group this with the previous three? Or
yeah, I think what's interesting is, on the back of a few theories of people saying that players were playing a little bit more reserved because of trying to support the makeshift centre backs. That's something Liverpool fans have been saying over the past few weeks. I tried to look into it, and what I found, to be honest, Josh, was, I don't know if you had a chance to look yourself, a lot of the kind of individual performances from that game on Sunday were mirrored from the fixture 12 months ago, the one that Liverpool won 2-0. You know, there was similar amount of touches in the attacking third for Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. You know, they seem to progress the same way. Just the key difference seems to be the issue that Liverpool have got at the moment, and that's kind of, you know, scoring goals, creating real clinical, clear-cut chances. So I think the performance is still all right. I think it's not all doom and gloom. I expect things to pick up. United, it was a decent performance because, you know, United come into that game flying. Really could have been a big statement for them. They would have really wanted to win it. They didn't. And beyond finishing strong, they didn't at any point really dominate Liverpool. So that's a positive. But the lack of goals does tie in with the ongoing issue, I think, at the moment.
I think aspects certainly improved. I liked that Klopp kind of seemed to recognise the issue and started Shaqiri in midfield, and I don't think he'd have done that if Liverpool weren't struggling for goals. So I think just kind of adding another player who's got goals on his side and just general threat on his side, I think was a positive. And I do think, specifically in the first half, Liverpool did look threatening and stuff like that. I mean, it's easier said than done, creating clear-cut opportunities against the Manchester United defence, that is more than willing to drop quite deep. And I think, unfortunately for Liverpool, I think a defender like Harry Maguire, for example, I think he's actually better suited when he's allowed to drop that deep. So I think Maguire was probably better suited to perform against Liverpool like that, as opposed to if he was going toe to toe with maybe a lesser opponent. But was it a good point? Was it a moment lost? Was it a lucky escape even? I mean, I suppose you could even look at that side of things.
I think in all, it was a decent point. Obviously, the way Liverpool are, this modern Liverpool, they want to be winning every game, especially home games, no matter who they play against. That being said, yeah, I think it was a game you definitely didn't want to lose, because there's going to be so many banana skins for every team this year that, now Liverpool are in a position where within one game week, they could be back joint top. Obviously, we're forgetting City just for a moment, just talking about United, but that closing that gap, they would have closed that gap basically in one game week. So had they lost, it would have been 2 game weeks at half point into the season. I still think they could recover from there, but I think it was a game that you would have liked to win, but just didn't want to lose. So on that basis, Josh, I'd probably say it is a decent point.
I think I'd agree, but it is a tricky one considering the first half dominance that Liverpool had. And then you obviously have to factor in the big chances that United had. I mean, the 2 biggest chances of the game comfortably were Pogba and Fernandes. Obviously, they didn't manage to score either of them thanks to Alisson, who again stepped up. But it's just I suppose it's a tricky situation currently to analyse, because Liverpool now, I think, sit in 4th place in the table, which is a little bit scary. But I don't think it'll. I don't know. It just feels like a mad season. I mean, Villa have got like 4 games in hand and this sort of stuff, and it is a bit mental at the minute. But I think we'll leave it there. Tricky match to analyse when it comes to United, but we'll move on to what should be, on paper at least, an easier game. Burnley and Anfield. Few people have got Mo Salah triple captain.
2 of them sitting on this podcast now.
I actually haven't. I've got him captain, but not triple.
Sorry, the captain.
But I think when it comes to this game, this is the kind of game you'd expect Liverpool to put to bed fairly comfortably. Even though I think the last time it happened, I think it finished 1-1. I think I'm right in saying that. But yeah, I mean, are Burnley the type of opponents that you want right now in this current situation, or are they a bit of a nightmare, or it's a bit of a tricky one, isn't it?
I actually think it's a bit of a tough nut for Liverpool to crack this one, because in fact it's quite a big game, because they haven't won or scored over the last 3. What Burnley are going to pose tactically is Liverpool's kryptonite at the moment a little bit, isn't it? In the sense that they'll sit deep, there won't be much ambition to win the game from an attacking point of view. I mean, and that they don't concede many goals at all. Like, I had a quick look at it, and I think they've been a little bit fortunate to have this record, but they've not conceded more than a single. Sorry, since October, they've only conceded more than a single goal in a match once, and that was against Manchester City. So except for that, obviously not picking up many points, don't score a lot of goals, but they don't concede a lot, and obviously it shows that they're difficult to break down, and that's been Liverpool's biggest issue. So it's not the best matchup, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned they don't score too many goals. They're actually the only team in the league at the moment who is still in single figures for the season. I think they've only scored 9. And if you look at goals per match minus penalties, I think penalties are what take Sheffield United above Burnley in the scoring department. I think even if you remove penalties, the only team that have scored fewer than Burnley is Sheffield United. But then, as you mentioned there, on the defensive side, they are doing enough, certainly more than Sheffield United are, when it comes to staying in games, keeping clean sheets. And specifically when it comes to Liverpool and finishing and all that sort of stuff, putting a chance away, a keeper that you probably don't want to face when that's the case is probably Nick Pope. Tends to be quite a good shot stopper. I think he tends to overperform based on the past couple of seasons. Burnley obviously get plenty of men between the shooter and the goal. Did you write about Nick Pope recently?
Yeah, I did. And I mean, you're basically summarising it really well. He's overperformed in a lot of the metrics, in terms of like the prevented goals metrics, and even on, you've probably seen it, Josh, even on FB's metrics or stat bombs. He's got like the best over performance in terms of XG. He does something. He's really interesting actually, because I was talking about him maybe being a top keeper. I think his distribution's untested, or maybe isn't good. One of the two. I don't think we can really conclude either way. But in terms of things like his shot stopping, he's performed the best in the league at the moment. And I thought this was dead interesting, Josh, in terms of defensive actions made away from the goal outside the penalty area. Only Alisson makes more. So that's the furthest average distance from goal that he makes a defensive action, and highest per 90 average of defensive actions made outside the penalty area, because that's obviously stuff that you associate with Alisson, with Ederson, kind of these sweeper keepers. And I thought it was quite interesting that Pope showed up well in that metric this season, because it kind of says that he might be able to do a job at a high level. But back to this game, yeah, he looks a really good keeper. And he's not someone you really want to be facing.
That defies a bit of logic, that, to be honest, because I can't think of many instances whereby he'd have the space even to come outside his box and stuff like that and come far from goal, because of how deep Burnley tends to defend. Why is he doing that? But it is interesting. Yes, I suppose it's worth looking into further, in fact. But yeah, Burnley currently 17th in the table, and on the attacking side, for expected goals per 90, they're currently 16th. That's excluding penalties, and 17th for shots. So we are kind of facing an attack, at least, that is very much bottom 5 worst in the league. And if you look at the players that Liverpool are going to have to deal with, I think it's going to be interesting in a way, because I think Liverpool have dealt with them easily over the past few seasons because of the aerial strength of Matip and Van Dijk. But I think without them two, maybe if you've got to use... I mean, I think Nat Phillips will probably play, to be honest, because I think one of the few strengths he's got is aerial strength. That's all that the Burnley attack have got. Chris Ward, Ashley Barnes, good in the air, good physical. So it'll be interesting to see if they cause Liverpool more problems than normal without Van Dijk and stuff. But I still can't see Burnley scoring.
No. I mean, this could be the game where the floodgates open. Don't get me wrong, because I said that one game where they did concede more than one goal. That was against City away. I think the most similar fixture in the Premier League to City away is Liverpool away. So you could well see a repeat of it. The thing is, as well, I imagine Sean Dyche doesn't really look at these fixtures as ones where you're going to pick points up in. He'll be looking at matches closer to teams around him, and for that reason, it'll probably filter to the players. And if Liverpool manage to get 1 or 2 goals in the first half, then they might come alive and get the confidence back. So,
to be honest, you saying that, then it's quite a scary thought. I haven't actually thought about that. If Liverpool go through another game, either A, without winning, or B, without scoring. If that was to happen again, 5th consecutive game really in the Premier League against another opponent that you've got to beat at Anfield if you're going to win the title, I'm not sure what I'll start to think then. I mean, I'm already on my way towards questioning whether this is maybe some sort of weird wider problem. I mean, most little narratives that arise, most little issues that arise, I'm very... I try to be very feet on the ground sort of thing. I don't get carried away from week to week. But this is week to week to week to week. This is about the 5th week now, so a little bit more concerned. It will be uncharted waters, I think, if Liverpool don't go back to normal to some extent this week.
Yeah, it's getting to that point where it goes from being a minor blip to not crisis, but it starts impacting what can actually happen this season, because if City carry on winning,
I think it would, to an extent, be a crisis in a way, because I think if Liverpool don't win again, and teams around them do, then Liverpool will be roughly bang on the halfway point, probably around 6th. And it will indicate, okay, a very minor crisis, but relatively speaking, considering the health that Liverpool have demonstrated for years now, this would be, as I said, uncharted waters, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, certainly this kind of Klopp era, it was. That's why I just don't expect it, to be honest. I'd be shocked if they didn't manage to get. I mean, I'm just laughing to myself thinking I'm saying this, but through this whole period, when we do a prediction, I've tipped Liverpool to win, and I've had egg on my face each time. But I maybe don't listen to me from a betting perspective, but I do fancy Liverpool to kind of rectify some of the issues they've had in recent weeks in this game.
I mean, I suppose you could dumb it down really to a very clear opportunity to correct everything that you got wrong against West Brom, because I think the threat and the problem at hand, if you like, is very similar in terms of the way both teams perform with and without the ball. Obviously, the threat, similar to West Brom for Burnley, is going to be very much aerial, physical, set pieces, and in attack you just have to show enough unpredictability, if you like, to find a way through and to get a goal from somewhere, whether that's a free kick, a corner, a shot outside the box, a tap in, just a cut back, a cross, just any way of finding the net really. And I can see Klopp starting Shaqiri again, maybe going a little bit gung-ho to an extent, considering the lack of threat that Burnley offer. Just another little note as well, one of the interesting numbers every season I find, when you look at the corner numbers for teams, I've never seen a team so keen to play in-swinging crosses than Burnley. So if on this match Liverpool give away a corner and Burnley don't hit some form of in-swinger, I'll be shocked. Looking at the season so far, Burnley have taken 66 corners, 61 have been in swinging, so they're going to put it on Alisson's head really, aren't they, and hope that it kind of bobbles in, which I think insistently happened a few seasons ago. I think it went in direct from the corner.
Yeah, it did. There was complaints over the foul, wasn't there? But it did get given a foul, and it was a goal.
And obviously without Van Dijk and without Matip, it's probably going to be, falling out the sky on the goal line, which is I'm not looking forward to be honest.
I know.
But we'll round up there anyway. So, yeah, the fine point now, the fine finishing point. Dave, predictions. This is a big one. This.
I'm not enjoying these anymore because we had when Liverpool were winning every week, it was easy for us, 100% record. No, I do. As I said, I've said it a few times. I've had egg on my face, but I'm going to go 3-0 and Salah to score 2 and get an assist because my fantasy team desperately needs it.
I'm going to go 2-0. I think Liverpool will be okay on the defensive side, keep a clean sheet, unless some form of set piece materialises. I can't see Liverpool conceding from open play though, and I think Klopp will go into this game knowing full well the absolute priority is to get the goals flowing again, and I think he'll kind of brief the players before the game that they need to basically do everything over the course of 90 minutes to put the ball in the back of the net as many times as they can, really, just to get back to scoring ways, because it's not healthy when you're going for the title. You need to be scoring goals. It's the most important thing in the game for me. So yeah, we should be back next week. Hopefully Liverpool have finally got back to winning and scoring ways, and hopefully we'll climb back up the table. But Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks for tuning in. See you next week.